Tough weekend for the Aztecs. They open and they struggle for a half. Here's what I think. We're 3 games into the season. San Diego State has played 2 quarters of really good offensive football. That was the second half against Texas A&M Commerce. That's it. They got shut out by Oregon State, and they got stomped by the Cal Golden Bears. They were all, in addition to losing 2 games by blowout nature, they lost the starting quarterback, Danny O'Neal. The worst part of Aztec football right now, a little bit overscheduled. I'm not pushing any panic button. I'm not going to be critical of Sean Lewis. Look who you played. You played 2 Pac-12 teams with 2 green quarterbacks. Both of them have never played before. It's going to be a tough learning curve. Once they get through this bye week, this week comes at the right time. This bye week for San Diego State, they fix the offensive line problems, and it gives them another week to get Danny O'Neal, the starting quarterback, totally healthy to get him back on the field, because a week from now they go to Central Michigan, and then after that, then they play everybody in the Mountain West. So they'll be playing their own people. They won't be playing up here. Offensive line. 15 penalties for this team in this game, most of them on the offensive line. 39 penalties in 3 Saturdays of football. It is really hard to believe. Defense, as hard as they played against Oregon State, they played that hard against Cal, but they wore out. They're on the field way too much. Gave up 473 yards. I thought Javance Johnson, playing his first game ever at college football level, he struggled, but man, there's a lot of athleticism in that kid. He was 13 for 29 for 156 yards. So Aztecs take a deep breath. They got to fix what's wrong in the offensive front with all these penalties. Sean Lewis must wake up in the middle of the night screaming about 3rd and 11, 3rd and 17. He had one, he was 3rd and 30. Yeah, where in a playbook have you got to play for 3rd and 30?
You don't.
Yeah, so that's where we are. UCLA. Is it too early to say maybe they hired the wrong guy as head coach, Deshaun Foster? They have not looked competitive at all. His game management has looked really weak. They won the first week of the season against Hawaii, which isn't very good. And then they got smoked at home at the Rose Bowl by Indiana and their transfer quarterback, Curtis Rourke. By the way, Ohio University Bobcat.
Hey.
He threw for 307 and 4 touchdowns for IU. Ethan Gerbers, quarterback, UCLA. UCLA starting quarterback, big-time football, Big Ten, throws for 137 and scuffling. They got outgained 430 to 208 at home in front of their own fans. So I pose this question. Is this the wrong coach that they hired? Because this does not look good at all. Oregon. They just buried Oregon State. Item 1. This is the rivalry game. This is the game that was always played the last game of the season, Thanksgiving weekend, in the rain, the cold, the mud back in the day. Oregon State Civil War.
Yeah.
Been played since the 1890s. Why the hell is it on the 3rd weekend of the season? Civil War game, Oregon makes a statement. Dan Lanning, all he wants to do is win. He doesn't give a crap who they beat or how much they beat him by. He just wanted to guarantee that Oregon State will never recruit a kid in the state of Oregon. They beat him 49-14, and they mashed him. Dylan Gabriel was pretty impressive, throwing the ball deep for the first time this season. By the way, the other rivalry game up there is called the Apple Cup. Washington State. That sucker is the last game in November. It shouldn't be played the 3rd weekend of the season. Washington State ambushes the Washington Huskies. 24-19, rebuilding year at UW. Johnny Mateer, we're going to see him down here in a couple weeks when Washington State comes to play San Diego State. He goes for 307 all-purpose yards in the Apple Cup win for the Cougars. He's had 3 straight really impressive games for Washington State. And then we got the next storyline here is on the Pac-12 conference. I've been told that there are a lot of pressure points on the Pac-12 to take the next step almost immediately to add 2 more after having added the 4 from the Mountain West. They want to get this to 8 so they can go to the networks and say, this is who you're going to televise. This is the kind of money we want for who is going to be in our conference. I've been told there's a lot of pressure on the Pac-12 to reconsider and look at Air Force. Bring them in because that's a national brand and that's an identity school with class and dignity. And in essence, it's not only just the Denver TV market, it's everybody who's ever wore the blue representing the Air Force as a commissioned officer or in the service. And there'll be a lot of eyeballs attached to anything related to Air Force football. And if Air Force is in the Pac-12 as the 7th member, I don't know where they're going to go get the 8th. Please don't tell me Memphis State. Don't tell me Tulane. That's ridiculous. Texas San Antonio, last I checked, was getting beat 57-6. Nah. So I don't know where they're going to go get an 8th one. Although I floated the idea after you floated the idea that, okay, get 7 and then go to the NCAA and say, we have offered Gonzaga, St. Mary's, and USF to come in as basketball members. So therefore, we will have an even stronger brand nationally in basketball to go with football. Give us a waiver. Let us just compete for 7 for college football playoffs. And then, of course, they're holding their breath because then we'll wait and see what transpires with Cal and Stanford, which I both think made terrible mistakes. And if UCLA wakes up in the middle of the night and says, my God, this decision to go to the Big Ten was a disaster, now UCLA comes back. So I'm just throwing a lot of ideas out there. I think the Air Force thing has a lot of credibility. And then I think Cal, Stanford, and maybe UCLA, that'd give them much more credibility rather than be Mountain West 2.0. Credibility be something like the Pac-12. And John Riley says,
yeah, Air Force would be more credible, but they're still a minor league kind of a sports organization. And to your point, yeah, Tulane and Memphis and all these other teams that are not sexy at all. But when you pare it all down, maybe Air Force is the one. And at least they're in one of the 2 time zones. You don't need to go to the central time zone.
With a TV market and a national following.
And but they're not going to be competitive. That's the problem. I remember the whole thing about Air Force is that they never had a good basketball team because the players weren't tall enough to fit in the cockpits. Is that a true story?
Yes.
Okay. So anyways, just to go back and comment on some of these other teams, that Aztec game was a freaking disaster, a big hot mess. I mean, I was watching that. I was rooting for the guys. The penalties were just mind-boggling. But the question I have is when we started, talking about the Aztecs, when Sean Lewis came into town, we weren't sure the QB was going to be, but I had assumed that AJ Duffy was going to be competitive for the number 1. Why isn't he playing?
I concur with you wholeheartedly, except O'Neal is much more athletic than Duffy. That's how he won it. O'Neal has responded really well to pressure, accuracy, etc. Maybe they're not seeing that from Duffy in practice. And then Johnson comes out of Oakland, and the kid is tall. He's 6'4". He's wiry. He can run and move the pocket. He's much more athletic than even Danny O'Neal is. So I was kind of impressed considering he was under siege. And I asked Sean Lewis today, I said, what's it like to coach 2 green quarterbacks? Because neither one of these kids have played at this level and have kind of hung in there and they have competed. But, they're forever wiping out big gains because of holding procedure. It's nonstop stuff. And every time I turn around, Sean Lewis is in his playbook. On the back of the playbook, last page, there's no page there for 3rd and 17 or 3rd and 30.
That was just brutal to watch those guys. But I was still, my heart's in it. I mean, I understand how difficult it is for them. Javance Johnson, he did show, but it was interesting. His passing mechanics are almost sort of sidearm. It was a little bit odd. The UCLA thing was interesting to me because Indiana, you usually think of as at the bottom half of the Big Ten. And boy, they just put a whooping on UCLA. So
where does that put UCLA as it relates to the Big Ten?
That's what I'm thinking. They may go over through the whole Big Ten. And the Oregon game, Dylan Gabriel, I still, not just because he's a lefty, but he has the body of a Steve Young. I mean, if you took away the Oregon or the Oklahoma gear and replaced it with 49er number 8, he's got the same body type on top of being a lefty, the same scrambling ability as Steve Young. I think it's a second coming.
He doesn't run like Steve Young ran, though.
Yeah, but he still runs well, but not as well.
He doesn't run for gains. He runs to move the pockets. I've been kind of impressed with him. Okay, you're a college football fan. Hey, you need to cycle us in and get into the chat box. Give us your opinion.